up. I can't run. You go ahead, I'll catch up with you. Here, Davy. It isn't fair! Oh, it isn't fair! He's been right!
I don't think most people understand what a tradition really is. They think of it like a family recipe or a holiday decoration, something warm and nostalgic. But the truth is, tradition is a cage with velvet lining, a soft noose. It's the whisper that says, "We've always done it this way," even as blood stains the floor beneath your feet. Shirley Jackson's The Lottery doesn't warn us of some monstrous evil hiding in the shadows. It exposes the monster hiding in plain sight, smiling, waving, passing out folded slips of paper and laughing with the neighbors. Evil in this story is not some demonic entity, it's civic engagement. It's the PTA meeting. It's the cheerful man in a white shirt and blue jeans saying, "Let's get this over with so we can get back to work."
It isn't fair.
Tessie Hutchinson screams. That's one of the most powerful final lines in literature. Not because it's poetic, but because it's the cry of someone who's finally woken up, right as the stones hit her skin. But let's go back. The first line of this story is a lie, or worse, it's a lullaby meant to keep us asleep. The morning of June 27th was clear and sunny, with the fresh warmth of a full summer day. The flowers were blossoming profusely and the grass was richly green. That sentence is so gentle it could be mistaken for a children's book. You don't expect what's coming next, because horror, when it's most effective, doesn't announce itself. It blends in with the picnic tables and chatter and green grass. The story unfolds slowly, but precisely. The children are the first to arrive. Bobby Martin had already stuffed his pockets full of stones. That line slips by so easily the first time. You think, oh, kids and rocks, maybe they're playing marbles. But Jackson isn't playing with you. She's loading the gun in plain sight, and she knows you won't notice, not until it's too late.
Hey, there's rocks over here!
The adults arrive next. Men speak of rain and taxes. Women chatter about gossip and family, and everything feels ordinary. That's the true terror of this tale. The evil is not hidden in a dark castle. It's standing in broad daylight, sandwiched between the post office and the grocery store. Mr. Summers enters, cheerful, respected, harmless. He was a round-faced, jovial man, and he ran the coal business, and people were sorry for him because he had no children, and his wife was a scold. He's the kind of man you'd ask to barbecue at your neighborhood block party, and he's the one holding the box. The black wooden box had been put into use even before Old Man Warner, the oldest man in town, was born. It's splintered and stained, ancient, a relic, but no one wants to replace it because it's always been this way. That's the magic spell that keeps tradition alive, fear of change. Every year, Mr. Summers suggests making a new one. Every year, the suggestion is ignored, and the box that kills, is stored casually.
Come on, baby.
The rest of the year, the box was put away, sometimes one place, sometimes another, sometimes on a shelf in the Martin grocery. That's how quickly society shelves its atrocities, like seasonal decor. And just before the drawing, just before the machine starts churning, Mrs. Hutchinson arrives late. "Wouldn't have me leave my dishes in the sink now, would you, Joe?" She laughs. The crowd laughs. Even horror has a sense of timing. Jackson lets us enjoy Tessie's smile because that makes her screams taste bitterer later. Then the drawing begins, slowly, carefully. The people had done it so many times that they only half listened to the directions. This line is everything. It's about ritual so ingrained that no one remembers the reason behind it. They just follow steps, like robots in church clothes. Names are called. Families step forward. Everyone draws, then waits. Then the names start floating up. "It's Hutchinson. It's Bill," someone whispers. Suddenly the laughter fades. Tessie's family is chosen. She protests. "You didn't give him time enough to take any paper he wanted. I saw you. It wasn't fair." But fairness doesn't live here. It never did. It moved out when obedience moved in, and now Jackson does something unholy. She makes the children draw too, even little Davy. "Take a paper out of the box, Davy," Mr. Summers says. The child laughs. Doesn't understand. Won't remember. Unless he lives long enough to draw again next year. That's how the system works. Start them young. Give them pebbles. Teach them where to aim. And still, Tessie fights. I think we ought to start over. I tell you it wasn't fair. But the machine doesn't care. It doesn't hear her. It hums forward. Because tradition doesn't need justification. It only needs repetition. When the papers are revealed, Nancy and Billy Jr. are safe. Tessie is not. Mr. Summers looks around. Show us her paper, Bill. And just like that, her husband pries the death sentence from her hand. A black spot on a white slip, made with pencil the night before. That's all it takes. All right, folks, Mr. Summers said. Let's finish quickly. And now the masks drop. The people who laughed with her, the friends who chatted with her, become executioners. Although the villagers had forgotten the ritual and lost the original black box, they still remembered to use stones. And when those stones fly, Tessie screams, "It isn't fair, it isn't right!" But they kill her anyway. This story is soaked in irony. The title, The Lottery, is the first lie. We associate lotteries with fortune, wealth, success. But here, the prize is death. The setting is another lie. A sunny day, laughter, family, community. But evil doesn't need thunder to function. It works better under clear skies. Old Man Warner, the town's crusty oracle, insists there's always been a lottery, but that's not proof. That's delusion. There hasn't always been a lottery, just as there hasn't always been slavery or segregation or war. These were choices made so long ago that they calcified into dogma. Old Man Warner snorted. "Pack of crazy fools," he said. "Listening to the young folks, nothing's good enough for them. Next thing you know, they'll be wanting to go back to living in caves, nobody work anymore, live that way for a while. Used to be a saying about lottery in June, corn be heavy soon. First thing you know, we'd all be eating stewed chickweed and acorns. There's always been a lottery," he added petulantly. "Bad enough to see young Joe Summers up there joking with everybody." Used to be a saying about lottery in June, corn be heavy soon. The original purpose of the lottery was to ensure good harvests through sacrifice. That, at least, is coherent in its horror. But now, nobody remembers that. They do it because their grandparents did. They do it because the coal man said so. They do it because the black box still sits on its stool, splintered and holy. And Tessie's final betrayal comes not from strangers, but from her son. Someone gave little Davy Hutchinson few pebbles. There's no purer image of systemic violence than that. A toddler weaponized by tradition against his own mother. That's what Jackson is showing us. Not just a story of cruelty, but the machinery of how cruelty is passed down, not by monsters, but by nice people, by us. In a post-World War II America, this story was nuclear. It shattered the idea that cruelty lived overseas, that America was immune to ritual violence, and it arrived during a time when conformity was king. The 1950s were about suburbs, smiles, and suppressed questions. You didn't rock the boat, you wore the uniform. You said the pledge. You didn't ask who was missing, but Jackson asked. And she did it with such elegance that people couldn't handle it. They canceled their New Yorker subscriptions in droves. They wrote angry letters. One person said, "I read it while soaking in the tub and was tempted to put my head underwater and end it all." That's the power of the lottery. It doesn't just unsettle you, it implicates you. You feel your own hands twitch. You wonder what kind of rock you'd throw. And what happens next? Nothing. Everyone goes home, has lunch, puts the box away until next year. Because that's how tradition works, not with passion, but with passivity. It whispers, "Let's get this over with." A sudden hush fell on the crowd as Mr. Summers cleared his throat and looked at the list. "All ready?" he called. "Now I'll read the names, heads of families first, and the men come up and take a paper out of the box. Keep the paper folded in your hand without looking at it until everyone has had a turn. Everything clear?" The people had done it so many times that they only half listened to the directions. Most of them were quiet, wetting their lips, not looking around. Then Mr. Summers raised one hand high and said, "Adams." A man disengaged himself from the crowd and came forward. "Hi, Steve," Mr. Summers said, and Mr. Adams said, "Hi, Joe." They grinned at one another humorlessly and nervously. Then Mr. Adams reached into the black box and took out a folded paper. He held it firmly by one corner as he turned and went hastily back to his place in the crowd, where he stood a little apart from his family, not looking down at his hand. You know, one of the most haunting things about this story is how no one is evil. No one. There is no villain, no cackling overlord, no leather-clad tyrant on a throne, just people. People like Mr. Summers, who smiles warmly and says, "Let's finish quickly." He doesn't seem to enjoy what's happening. But he does it efficiently. He hosts the Halloween party, he manages the square dances, and he oversees the murder. He's a company man. He wears a white shirt and jeans and holds the hand of a toddler as that child reaches into a box that will determine if he or his family lives. Shirley Jackson didn't give us a demon to hate. She gave us an administrator, a man who does the job because someone has to, because it's what he's always done. And that's the point. Evil doesn't need a villain, it just needs a schedule. Now let's talk about something uncomfortable, the bystanders. We love to think we'd be different, right? That if we lived in that village, we'd speak up, we'd say something, we'd run to Tessie and scream, "This is wrong!" But we wouldn't, or at least not most of us, because we're not trained to see evil in what's familiar. We're trained to respect it, even when it's holding a rock. There's a woman in the story, Mrs. Delacroix. Early on, she jokes with Tessie, chats about how the lottery seems to come earlier every year. But later, Jackson writes, Delacroix selected a stone so large, she had to pick it up with both hands. There is something venomous about that line. Not because it's loud, but because it's so casual. There is no hesitation, no apology, only practical movement. Delacroix chooses the biggest rock she can carry. She is not a psychopath. She is not bloodthirsty. She is, in fact, a friend of Tessie. And still, she becomes a killer because that's what's expected. That's what the town does. It's what her parents did and what their parents did. There's always been a lottery, says Old Man Warner. He is the fossil of the town's history, the high priest of habit. He doesn't even remember why the lottery exists. But to him, that's irrelevant. The lottery must continue, not because it makes sense, but because it exists. He scoffs at the young fools in other towns who've stopped doing it. Nothing but trouble in that pack of young fools. To Warner, morality is a threat. Thinking is rebellion. Tradition is a god. And Jackson's brilliance is in showing how familiar that sounds. Because we've all met a Warner. We've heard his voice in classrooms, in politics, at dinner tables. The one that says, don't question the way things are. Don't change what's always worked. Even when it doesn't work. Even when it kills. And still, even Warner pales in comparison to the real heartbreak of the story. Bill Hutchinson, Tessie's husband. The man who, upon seeing that he has drawn the slip for his family, reacts with quiet acceptance. He doesn't shout, he doesn't protest, he doesn't even flinch. He just says, right, when asked to draw again. And when Tessie protests, when she cries and begs for fairness, shut up, Tessie, Bill says. That line is brutal. It rips apart any illusion of loyalty or love. This isn't a marriage. This is ritual compliance. Bill isn't a husband anymore. He's a cog. He doesn't try to save her. He doesn't even try. This is what Shirley Jackson understood better than most authors. Fear doesn't control us. Tradition does. Habit does. Social approval does. We obey not because we're afraid, but because we've been taught to. The rocks in this story aren't the real weapons. The silence is. And still, the most savage moment, they give pebbles to her son. Someone gave little Davy Hutchinson few pebbles. I have no metaphor for that. That is the metaphor. That's how cycles of violence continue. You don't need to explain it to a child. Just normalize it. Hand him a stone and tell him he's part of something sacred. He'll do it. Not because he's evil, but because he wants to belong. That's the real horror of the lottery. It's not what people do. It's what they allow. Because the ritual continues not from passion, but from indifference. Bill Hutchinson went over to his wife and forced the slip of paper out of her hand. It had a black spot on it. The black spot Mr. Summers had made the night before with the heavy pencil in the coal company office. Bill Hutchinson held it up, and there was a stir in the crowd. All right, folks, Mr. Summers said, let's finish quickly. Although the villagers had forgotten the ritual and lost the original black box, they still remembered to use stones. The pile of stones the boys had made earlier was ready. There were stones on the ground with the blowing scraps of paper that had come out of the box. Delacroix selected a stone so large she had to pick it up with both hands and turn to Mrs. Dunbar. Come on, she said, hurry up. Mr. Dunbar had small stones in both hands, and she said, gasping for breath, I can't run at all. You'll have to go ahead and I'll catch up with you. The children had stones already, and someone gave little Davy Hutchinson a few pebbles. Bear with me for a moment. Let's go down a slight journey. Now, there's a reason the lottery lingers in the gut long after the final stone drops. And it's not just because of what it says about one town. It's what it exposes about all of them. Because this story, this twisted inheritance, it echoes through other works, other villages, other rituals. M. Night Shyamalan's The Village practically breeds the lottery's heir. It's a film about a secluded community that hides from a violent outside world, or so it seems. The people live in a fear of monsters in the wood, but of course there are no monsters, just costumes, fabricated fear, fabricated ritual, fabricated truths designed to keep the population obedient. And maybe the most haunting line from The Village is not a scream or a twist. It's the soft-spoken justification. We created a story to protect them. But protect them from what? From grief? From truth? From the randomness of life? It's like lies compounding on more lies. That's the same question that bleeds from the soil of the lottery. Because when a tradition outlives its meaning, what you've left with isn't protection, it's performance. It's the optics, violence dressed as virtue. And people, seemingly good people, will believe it because they've been told it is for the greater good.
Go back. Never.
What was the purpose of our leaving? Let us not forget it was out of hope of something good and right.
You should not have made decisions without us. You have gone
I'm
too far.
guilty, Robert. I made a decision of the heart. I cannot look into another's eyes and see the same look I see in August's without justification. It is too painful. I cannot bear it.
I love this quote by Voltaire that kind of stuck to the soul to some degree. He once wrote, "Those who can make you believe absurdities can make you commit atrocities." And let that sink in. That should be carved into the foundation of every institution on earth. Because history has proven it again and again and again and again. Whether it's burning witches or banning books, whether it's scapegoating entire groups or stoning someone on a beautiful sunny day in a lovely field, the absurd becomes law, and the law becomes sacred. This is, maybe I'll put some background music of violins or something. Now, look at the Hunger Games. We tend to see it as a dystopian fiction, a distant future that reeks of sci-fi. But let's strip away the neon hair and the hovercrafts and all the science behind it. What is it really? It's the lottery scaled up, dialed way up. The government mandates an annual sacrifice, 2 children selected at random from each district to fight to the death. And the people, they watch, they cheer, they cry, but they still tune in. They watch, they celebrate, they scream, they cry for a moment, and go back to eating their porridge or their steak or lobster. And worse, they send their children to reap the harvest of a system they didn't create, but dare not question. Because in both stories, violence isn't an act, it's a tradition. It's televised, it's institutionalized, sanitized with rituals and rules. It's kind of like when the internet came out. If it's on the internet, it must be true. If it's written down and someone said it at some point, it must be true. But at the end of the day, it's still a public execution. And the Hunger Games shows us what the lottery implied. It's not just a system that's cruel, it's how easily people adjust to it. Hamish drinks to forget, Effie clings to etiquette, and even Katniss, our rebel symbol, plays the game, kissing Peeta, smiling for the cameras until it's safe to show teeth. Because survival demands complicity before it ever allows resistance.
But maybe the most chilling modern echo of the lottery comes from Lord of the Flies. A group of young boys, stranded without adults, descended into savagery. They invent chants, paint their faces, designate enemies, sacrifice innocents. And just like in Jackson's village, no one stops it. Because that's the terrifying truth of Shirley Jackson laid bare. You don't need evil to make evil happen. You just need obedience. You just need enough people to believe the story. And that story can be anything. That's how it's always been. It's for the greater good. It's tradition. But stories, left unquestioned, become cages. And the people inside, those cheerful, smiling people to some degree, they forget there is even a door.
Let's zoom out now. Let's talk about the historical moment this story was published. 1948, post-war America, a time of supposed peace, but really conformity. A time when people wanted normalcy, white picket fences, smooth jazz, smiling faces. A time when questioning your country or your neighbor made you suspicious, dangerous. The Red Scare was already brewing. McCarthyism was on the horizon. The House Un-American Activities Committee was getting cozy. And here comes Shirley Jackson, a woman writing from her small town in Vermont, detonating a literary bomb in the New Yorker. She handed Americans a mirror, and they smashed it. Readers hated this story. Letters poured in. People canceled subscriptions. One psychiatrist demanded to know where this ritual took place. Another thought it was a report on real events, because deep down they recognized it. They weren't scared of the rocks. They were scared of what those rocks meant. They were scared that this wasn't fiction, that it was allegory, and worse, that it might be accurate. Because if the lottery is about anything, it's about how easy it is to become complicit. How the line between I could never and it's just what we do is thinner than tissue paper. It's about the people who stayed silent during the Holocaust, who didn't ask why their neighbors disappeared, who clicked their heels and followed orders. It's about people who supported slavery for hundreds of years because that's the way it's always been. It's about every time you've stayed quiet when someone told a cruel joke, every time you thought something was wrong but didn't speak because you didn't want to be the only one. They stood together, and their jokes were quiet, and they smiled rather than laughed. That's the mood of the story, a nervous town, knowing something bad is coming but trying to pretend otherwise, trying to smile. Jackson even strips away identity from the victim. Tessie Hutchinson doesn't become the winner because of something she did. She wasn't cruel, she wasn't corrupt, she was randomly selected. Bill Hutchinson was standing quiet, staring down at the paper in his hand. Even after learning his wife is the one, he doesn't blink. He doesn't beg, he holds her hand out. And in that moment, Jackson makes us realize the system is the villain, not the people. But the system is made of people, and that means we're all responsible. You can read the lottery as a critique of capital punishment, of the military draft, of religious ritual, of war, of systemic racism. You can read it as a metaphor for mob mentality, for nationalism, for blood sacrifices of every kind, physical, emotional, spiritual. And every reading would be correct, because this story isn't about a place. It's about a pattern, and that pattern is everywhere, in institutions, in schools, in our families. It's in the excuses we give when we say, it's not that bad. It's in the way we distance ourselves from harm because we didn't throw the biggest stone. It's in the way we call for peace, but only after the body hits the ground. And maybe that's why this story hurts, because we see ourselves in every corner of that village. We see our parents, our teachers, our co-workers, our neighbors. We see ourselves holding that slip of paper, hoping it's blank. We see ourselves laughing nervously. We see ourselves walking away after the final scream. And worst of all, we see ourselves forgetting, because the most evil line in the entire story isn't said by Warner or Mr. Summers or even Tessie. It's this. The original paraphernalia for the lottery had been lost long ago. That's the nail in the coffin. Not that the ritual is cruel, but that no one even remembers why they do it. The logic is gone, only the blood remains, and every year the box comes out, and every year someone dies, and every year the dishes wait in the sink. So what do we do with that? What do we do when the rocks are in our hands? Do we throw them? Do we look away? Do we hand them to our children? Or do we ask, finally, with blood in the dirt and screaming in the air. Why? Why do we do this? Why does this system exist? Why do we follow rituals we don't believe in? Why do we let other people suffer as long as we're safe? Shirley Jackson didn't give us an answer. She gave us a challenge. Look at the lottery in your life. Find the box, ask what's inside it, and then, for God's sake, burn it. Because tradition isn't sacred, people are, and maybe next time when the stones come out, we drop them and we walk away together. If this narrative resonated with you, do support us. Hit that like button, drop a comment with your thoughts, and subscribe. Thank you for staying with us to the end. See you in the next video on Plaid Chronicles.